Secretary of State Marco Rubio arrives in Israel today, and it'll just be hours after Vice President J.D. Vance departs. Rubio is the latest in a steady stream of U.S. officials meeting with Israeli leaders to keep President Trump's peace deal on track.
In his talks with the vice president, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu drew some red lines, particularly on Turkey's movement. CBN's Julie Stahl has more.
Israeli police escorted Vice President J.D. Vance and his wife Usha to the Old City for a tour of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the site where many believe Jesus was crucified. Israeli government spokesperson Shosh Bedrosian said Vance's visit and meetings with Israeli leaders made a strong impression.
Prime Minister Netanyahu said he was impressed with the vice president's clarity, sharpness, solidarity for our common cause, and sincere friendship that he saw in conference and private meetings that took place today.
One sticking point is allowing any troops from Turkey to take part in a peacekeeping force in Gaza. Turkey's President Erdogan strongly supports the Muslim Brotherhood, the same group that spawned Hamas. When asked about Turkey's involvement, Netanyahu said,
"So I have very strong opinions about that. You want to guess what they are?"
Vance gave Netanyahu room to disagree.
We don't want in Israel, we don't want a vassal state, and that's not what Israel is. We don't want a client state, and that's not what Israel is. We want a partnership. We want an ally here.
U.S.-Israel analyst Eli Piepsh told CBN News that Israel will take action if its national security is threatened in Gaza by Qatar or Turkey.
This is going to be the opportunity where if Qatar and Turkey are going to be acting and are going to be trying to rehabilitate, are going to protect Hamas instead of disarming Hamas, Israel is going to be very, very quick to act. If Israel acted in Doha a few weeks ago, Israel can act in Gaza even if there are Qatari or Turkish elements.
Piepsh says Turkey and Qatar value their relations with the U.S. over their relations with Hamas.
And that, I think, is a fundamental feature of this agreement. And if there's going to be friction between those countries and Israel, it will also mean there'll be friction between those countries and the U.S. And I don't think Turkey and Qatar want to have friction with the U.S.
Shortly after Vance leaves Israel, Secretary of State Marco Rubio arrives. Rubio is scheduled to meet with Netanyahu on Friday. Wednesday, Israel's parliament advanced a bill extending Israeli sovereignty over its communities in biblical Judea and Samaria, also known as the West Bank. While the vote appeared to be a political maneuver aimed at the Netanyahu government, Rubio said such a move could endanger the peace process.
That's a vote in the Knesset, but obviously I think the president's made clear that's not something we'd be supportive of right now, and we think is even threatening to the peace deal.
Meanwhile, the funeral of returned hostage Tal Haimi took place in his home of kibbutz near Yitzhak, which he died defending on October 7th. And Thai hostage Sonthaya Okarasri was honored prior to sending his body home for burial. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, the joke currently circulating is the United States is providing babysitters to Israel, that this cycle of presidents and secretary of states is all trying to keep Israel from recognizing what is clearly going on in the ground in Gaza, and that is Hamas is violating the terms of the ceasefire. They're trying to keep the peace deal on track, and they're trying to keep Israel from reinvading Gaza, and that's the whole game here. What is fascinating to me is that they're not putting the pressure they need to put on Qatar and Turkey. Hamas is a creation of those two countries, and that's how Hamas even got to the deal in the first place to release the hostages. Any peace agreement that then has Turkish or Qatari supervision in Gaza means the rise of Hamas. They are all part of the Muslim Brotherhood. They're deeply influenced by that ideology, and that ideology calls for the elimination of the Jewish state. So just imagine if Turkey had its army in Gaza supposedly to enforce the peace. That group, because of brotherhood with the Muslim Brotherhood, allows them to have rockets and other means of attack at the Gaza envelope on Israel's southern border. At that point in time, any kind of retaliation by Israel risks a huge war. a war not just in Gaza, but a war with Turkey. Turkey, as a member of NATO, would then trigger some defense obligations by Europe and the United States. This could get horrible. This is not any kind of pathway to peace. It's a pathway for a conflagration that we can't understand. I don't get our foreign service right now. I don't get the State Department, the whole analysis going into this. We need to follow what Saudi Arabia and the UAE have clearly said. If Hamas stays with their weapons, we're out of here. If Qatar and Turkey are part of this, we're out of here because they understand the underlying ideology. This is Muslim Brotherhood. They don't want peace. They want the elimination of Israel.